everyone, and welcome again to the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. We are joined today by Philadelphia Inquirer sports columnist, radio host, and author Mike Sielski. And I may also add to that list a proud alum of LaSalle University. And Mike is here to join us to talk about his newest book. And first of all, I want to welcome Mike to the program. Mike, thanks for being with us. There he is. He's holding it up. He knows how to do it.
Good to be with you, Paul. It's great to see you again.
Same here. Magic in the Air. This is available right now. The book is just hot off the presses, and it's all about the slam dunk in basketball. We'll get into that and Mike's work as a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, where I'm sure he is very, very busy these days with what's going on in the world of sports here in Philadelphia, as well as his work on the radio. So, Mike, tell us what brought you to the topic of basketball, but not necessarily basketball, but the slam dunk in basketball.
Sure. So after my previous book, The Rise, which was a biography of Kobe Bryant, I was hunting around for book ideas, trying to brainstorm with my agent. And a friend of mine, Tyler Kepner, who has covered Major League Baseball for close to 30 years for the New York Times and The Athletic, and he's a Flowertown alum, Flowertown native, I should say, as well, wrote a great book called K, A History of Baseball in 10 Pitches. And it was a really unique way to tell the story of the history of baseball. Each chapter was based around one of the pitches that a major league pitcher throws. And Tyler, in each of those chapters, basically told the story of that pitch. So chapter 1 was the fastball, chapter 2 was the curveball, and so on and so forth. And, you know, he really got into some terrific anecdotes and details and stories about baseball through the prism of each of those pitches. And I thought, that's a really cool way to do a book. I wonder if I could do something like that with basketball. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that so many of the sport's most influential and famous figures and so many of its big events, kind of transformative events, were centered around the dunk, whether you were talking about players like Michael Jordan or Julius Erving, whether you were talking about an event like the decision to ban the dunk in college and high school basketball in 1967. I thought, oh, there's quite a bit there. And then I started to do some digging way back to try to figure out who had dunked the ball for the first time in a game. And I couldn't really figure that out, but I found a ton of interesting anecdotes and stories. And I thought, boy, there's something here, kind of a fun romp through the history of basketball and the changes to America, all through the prism of this one act, a slam dunk.
And that, in doing my work and research for this interview, Mike, that was the first question that came to my mind is, when did the slam dunk, when was it introduced? When did it happen? Where did it occur? Was it, the genesis of where this thing that really revolutionized the NBA and basketball? But any idea, and you may have just answered it in your previous answer, but any idea exactly where we saw the slam dunk for the first time?
I don't think we'll ever know, Paul. I mean, I was teetering on the edge of a rabbit hole of trying to figure out exactly who the first player to dunk was and when that player dunked. And I started to drive myself crazy, thinking I'm never going to be able to pin this down. And then I realized I'm never going to be able to pin this down. So let me try to tell a few stories that get as close to the dunk's origin story as I can. What I can tell you is there was a player in the mid-1930s named Joe Fortenberry from Happy, Texas. And he was on a semi-pro team in the mid-1930s and a couple of months before the Olympics. And Fortenberry, as it turned out, was the best player on the 1936 U.S. Olympic team, which was the first year that the Olympics had basketball. A couple of months before that, his semi-pro team was playing an exhibition game at Madison Square Garden. And Arthur Daly, who was a sports columnist for the New York Times, happened to be there. And he saw Fortenberry and another teammate stuffing the ball through the hoop in pregame warmups. And he wrote, he had never seen anything like this before. And he wrote that Fortenberry was stuffing the ball through the hoop as if he were dunking a roll into a cup of coffee. And that was it. That was really the first formal occasion in which the terms basketball and dunk were really linked. And because it was in the New York Times, it took off from there. So there's a whole chapter in the book about Joe Fortenberry, not just about the fact that he dunked, but about the Olympics, about the meaning of that Olympics. You know, it's 1936. The Summer Games were in Berlin during Hitler's reign over Germany. That's the Olympics of Jesse Owens and the boys in the boat. You know, a lot of people feel like they're familiar with those games, but Joe Fortenberry is kind of a side story, and I wanted to bring him back to his rightful place in the spotlight, I'd say.
I know this is going to sound like I'll use the term dumb question, but so that everybody's on the same page as to what exactly is a slam dunk, I think it's a fair question to ask because people probably have seen it. They think they may know what it is, but if we were to go into the dictionary and look for the term slam dunk, how do you describe it? What is the definition of a slam dunk?
I think the simplest way to say it is when a player in a basketball game leaps up and stuffs the ball through the hoop directly with his hand hitting the rim, his or her hand hitting the rim and stuffing it through. You know, and you know, this question kind of came to the forefront during that 9-year period from 1967 to 1976 when the dunk was banned in high school and college basketball. You know, players had to get creative about how they put the ball through the hoop because they could be penalized if they actually dunked the ball. So, players such as David Thompson, who was a wonderful player at the University of at North Carolina State University, you know, to this day regarded as the best player in ACC history. You know, couldn't dunk the ball. He had to drop it through or finger roll it or not, you know, carom it in off the backboard. So, you know, I think your question's not a dumb one at all. It got to the heart of whether these players could be penalized and be assessed a technical foul for a 9-year period. You know, during that time that it was banned.
So while it was banned in high school and collegiate basketball, it still was allowed in the pros. What was the mindset to ban it on the lower levels, on the high school level and the collegiate level? I mean, yeah, it's okay for the professionals, but we're not going to do that on the high school or collegiate level.
Well, the reasons given at the time, at least publicly, were well, it's player safety. We don't want players to get injured going up and dunking the ball and getting their legs cut out from under them, and we're going to end up spending a lot of money replacing broken rims and shattered backboards. But you don't have to be a PhD in history to put two and two together here and understand that the dunk gets banned by what was referred to as the National Basketball Committee. We actually had one of these, which was the governing body for amateur basketball in the United States at the time. It gets banned in 1967. So think about this, okay? White players had been dunking the ball in the early 50s. You know, we're able basically to document that the first college player to dunk the ball in a game is a guy named Bob Kurland at Oklahoma A&M in the late 1940s. But in the 1950s and 60s, you have an influx of black players bubbling up from the cities and playgrounds and streets of America towards basketball's highest level. And more of those players are coming to the sport and dominating the sport. So much so that in 1966, you have the memorable NCAA championship game where Texas Western starts 5 black players and beats Kentucky, which has an all-white team and is coached by the man who's probably the most powerful figure in college basketball at that time, Adolph Rupp, who doesn't like the fact that his team is losing to Texas Western, is getting dunked on by Texas Western, and that Texas Western has a bunch, you know, of black players dunking on his white players. Mm-hmm. Then you get Lou Alcindor, you know, who becomes known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who starts playing for UCLA in 1966-67 and is the most dominant force that college basketball has ever seen. Statistically, in his one season where the dunk was legal, Alcindor had his best statistical year of his college career. So the people who have their hands on the levers of power in college and high school basketball decide that suddenly the sport is becoming something that Dr. James Naismith didn't intend it to be and something it was never intended to be. And so the dunk is banned. And for 9 years, you are not allowed to dunk in the game. And so David Thompson and Julius Erving and all these high-flying players who are entering the sport and taking it to heights and levels of popularity, even with during the dunk ban that the sport's never experienced before, can't actually do what they come to be best known for, which is dunking.
Hmm. So um, when we talk about the slam dunk, and again, in reading a lot about the book and some of the praise that your book is getting, it's not just a movement in basketball, but it really becomes a movement in our culture, in our society. I mean, when you look at things like the slam dunk, you know, many people may just think, well, it's nothing than, you know, an athlete, a professional athlete showing off what he or she can do. But this really gets to the heart of how, and you know, 1967 and the ban, but it really gets to the heart of America and what is going on in America and what is going on with the sport of basketball at that time. Before it, you know, matures to where we are in 2025, which we'll get to in a minute. But I think you would agree that it becomes a cultural phenomenon, if you will.
It absolutely does. I mean, it's a sign of the counterculture. It's a sign of Black Americans being able to assert themselves, you know, and Black men at that time who were playing the sport, asserting themselves as individuals. Here is
Mm-hmm.
a move. I mean, the dunk is the ultimate act of domination in the sport of basketball. I am throwing the ball down with all of my strength and force over you who are trying to stop me. And, you know, I mentioned a PhD earlier. I mean, you could write, you know, there could be research studies conducted on the idea of masculinity and intimidation and racial stereotyping within the act of the dunk and the players who made it popular. You know, it was an act that allowed Black Americans at a time when they're struggling to gain equality and a foothold in American society, that they can show they are every bit the equals, if not the superiors, of white America at that time. And then that necessarily leads to a figure like Julius Erving, right, who is able to marry the street game, the flamboyance, the improvisational nature of basketball as it's changing and evolving with the influx of these players with the mainstream, because he is so intelligent and such a great teammate and is so graceful and beautiful to watch that the establishment, the mainstream culture, white America, however you want to define it, looks at him and says, "Oh, okay, well, this isn't that bad." If Dr. J, who's such a great teammate and whose teams with the Sixers are competing for championships year after year after year, can do this, and it doesn't affect his team, it only benefits it, then who are we to stand in the way of this? Let's enjoy it. And Julius, of course, had the additional layer to him that when he was in his prime in the American Basketball Association playing for the Virginia Squires and then the New York Nets, you know, he had this air of mystery about him because relatively few people watched the ABA relative to the NBA or college basketball. And Julius played collegiately at the University of Massachusetts, where nobody saw him play. UMass was not a dominant basketball program at the time at all. So if you were someone who was a New York Nets fan on Long Island in 1974 or 75, and you told someone, "Hey, I saw Julius Erving play last night." I mean, this was the equivalent of telling someone, "Hey, my wife and I went to vacation in Scotland, and we were standing on the shore of this lake, and a sea serpent came out of the water. You had to be there to see it." Because Julius and the idea of Dr. J were as much myth as they were man.
Yeah, that's funny. Um, Now let's move ahead to 2025, and you know, we talked about you know, where the slam dunk came from and how it evolved, but we don't see. I mean, one thing that I think is missing in basketball today is the slam dunk. So it's, I mean, you know, occasionally we see it, but um, so what happened? What happened to it?
I think a few things happened. Number one, it was so popular for so long that it became harder over time for players to impress the casual fan by flying through the air and dunking the ball. It was one thing when, you know, Julius is bursting onto the scene and debuts with the Sixers, and we get to see what we've been missing when he's been in the ABA for so long, or when Michael Jordan comes along and Dominique Wilkins comes along and players like that, everything looks breathtaking because there's a newness to it. And now 30, 40 years later, it's like, yeah, we've seen guys dunk the ball a lot. I think that's part of the reason, in fact, the predominant reason that there's this fascination over the last 3 years with Mac McClung, who is a G League player who gets signed by an NBA team each year just before the slam dunk contest, just so he can compete in the slam dunk contest. And he's won it each of the last 3 years and becomes kind of a folk hero for it. Mac McClung is a 6'2" white guy. So he's defying every customary stereotype about who should win a dunk contest. But seeing a 6'2" player jump over a car or do a 360 or 540 spin before dunking restores the sense of wonder that the casual fan used to have about watching Dr. J or Michael Jordan take off from near the foul line and dunk it. Okay. And that's essential to the popularity of basketball, the sense that we are seeing something that so few individuals on the planet can do. And I think players have gotten so big and so fast and so athletic that some of that wonder is kind of muted. We're used to it. The dunk nowadays, in the age of analytics and the rise of the three-point shot and player efficiency and teams trying to maximize, their production on the court, the dunk has become more about function than about form. It's viewed increasingly simply as the easiest way to put the ball through the hoop. The closer you get, the more likely you are to dunk it, and the less likely you are to miss the shot. If you look at shot charts for year after year in the NBA, the 25 places on the court where the most shots are taken by teams in the NBA, I'm generalizing here, but like 13 of them are right around the rim and 12 of them are around the three-point arc. And there's no mid-range game. There's less spontaneity. There's less improvisational play. There's less freedom for players to be spectacular for the sake of being spectacular. We see less of a player like a Kobe Bryant or an Allen Iverson making a circus shot where we say to ourselves, how did he do that? And more of a role player standing in the corner behind the three-point arc, waiting for someone to pass him the ball and just standing still there. And then when he gets the ball, he shoots a three-pointer. One of those is really exciting. One of those is pretty boring. And we've tended towards the boring, at least at the NBA level, for a while now.
So give us an example of who you spoke with in writing the book. And the other thing I want to get to is, even before, who did you speak with? How long did it take you to write this book? I mean, because you're looking at this, it's not like you're looking at years and years and years and years of history of basketball. That's a pretty daunting task unto itself. So how long did it take you to get all this stuff into a book once you embarked on this journey?
It took me about a year and a half to finish the first draft of the manuscript. And I ended up talking to people from all over the place. For the Joe Fortenberry chapter, for instance, I flew to Amarillo, Texas, and spent time with Joe's son, Oliver, who had kept all of his memorabilia and who showed me where the family barn was, where Joe learned how to play basketball. I went down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and spent a couple days on NC State's campus because there are 2 chapters in the book about NC State players, one about David Thompson, who I mentioned, and one about Lorenzo Charles, who quite literally won the national championship for NC State in 1983 with a dunk. It's the only time a dunk at the buzzer has won the national championship in college basketball. I went to Murray, Kentucky for a couple of days to talk to people about Ja Morant, the Memphis Grizzlies star of the present day, because Ja went to college at Murray State. So I wanted to get a sense of, what was special about Murray and how did they regard kind of the heir to the throne of Jordan and Irving and Wilkins and all of these guys. I talked to Julius over the phone for about 45 minutes. I did phone interviews with Dominique Wilkins and Daryl Morey, the Sixers president and general manager, who kind of pushed the analytics revolution forward, that took the dunk from, as I said, a beautiful piece of improvisation to the thing you do just to put the ball through the hoop. Mm-hmm. I talked to a lot of sports writers and historians, and did some archival research. Spent a small fortune on Amazon buying books that nobody's read before, or at least haven't in a long time. So it took a while. It was like each chapter was its own book, as opposed to the Kobe Bryant book, which was a straightforward narrative all the way through. I felt like I was finishing a chapter and then starting again, and then finishing that chapter and then starting again. But it was a fun journey, and I hope people who buy it and read the book find it a fun journey too.
I've interviewed you before and have known you for quite some time through our LaSalle connection. But go back to when you were a student sitting in a classroom at LaSalle at 20th and Olney. Did you, in your wildest dreams, ever think that you would have not one, not two, but three books, be a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and a radio talk show host on 94.1 WIP? Did that ever enter into your sphere at that time, sitting in a classroom at 20th and Olney?
Now I was just trying to meet girls, Paul. I really was.
We all were.
No, yeah. Well, look, I the job I have at the Inquirer as one of its lead sports columnists has been a dream job of mine since I was at LaSalle. I got to meet and get to know very well Bill Lyon, who had been the columnist at the Inquirer for close to 40 years and had the job that I have now. And he became my mentor. And I really that was my dream job. And I still love it every day. As far as hosting a radio show or writing books, that didn't enter into my thinking very much. To be honest, I was so busy with whether it was working at the Collegian as a writer and an editor, or being involved in a fraternity, doing some stuff for LaSalle TV, my academics, my social life. My college years, like a lot of students everywhere, and including at LaSalle, you're just trying to have the best possible, the richest, most rewarding experience you can have. And, I carried a lot of, I paid a lot of attention and had a lot of anxiety over academics and the social life and all that sort of stuff. So, other than saying to myself, boy, I would love to be the lead sports columnist for the Inquirer someday, I didn't think much about those other things you mentioned. I was just kind of trying to get through day to day.
Sure. With this book under your belt now, it's book number 3, correct?
Four. This is my fourth, actually.
What's the fourth book? I mentioned
Jackie, How to Be Like Jackie Robinson.
Okay.
Fading Echoes, The Rise, and now Magic in the Air.
So what's book number 5 then?
The working title is Going the Distance, and I am writing a book about the making of the movie Rocky. I'm trying to tell the story of how Sylvester Stallone and the people who collaborated on Rocky, created this piece of pop culture that has become, I think it's fair to say, iconic. It's going to be the 50th anniversary of the film's release next year in 2026. And I want to put the film in its proper context with respect both to what was going on in the United States at the time and what was going on in Philadelphia, the city, the boxing scene, Stallone's background with the city, all the things that went into it. I'll tell you a quick story. I was in New Orleans for the week leading into the Super Bowl, and then obviously covered the Super Bowl for the Inquirer. Sure. And the Friday before the game, I drove from New Orleans out to Baton Rouge to the campus of Louisiana State University. Bill Conti, who wrote all the music for Rocky, is an alumnus of LSU, and he left all his papers to the library there in its special collections section. So on that Friday morning, I was in that library holding the original sheet music for Gonna Fly Now, which was really, really cool to see the notes he had made in the margins in red pencil, and some letters and telegrams that he had sent and written during the time around the film. It was a researcher's dream. So I'm looking forward to digging more into that over the next several months.
Yeah, needless to say, Stallone's contributions to the city of Philadelphia are enormous, and I look forward to reading that book and having you back on to talk about that book, because oftentimes when visitors come from out of town, they'll say to me, what should I see, or where should I go, or what should I do? And at the top of everyone's list, it's not the Liberty Bell. You would think Philadelphia, the birthplace of freedom. the Rocky steps. That's what they want. And I kiddingly would say, I don't know if the Philadelphia Art Museum would be happy to hear that the steps, the iconic steps there, are referred to the Rocky steps. I think they have come to accept it today. But I know back when early in my career, when I think Rocky 2 came out, whenever he donated the statue that was used as a movie prop, there was a lot of resistance by the city
Oh, yes.
to have that at the art museum, because many of the people on the art commission felt that it was not a piece of work, not a piece of artwork. It was nothing more than a movie prop. So, and something that still resonates with me, but yet it's the Rocky Steps, as they're called, probably, if not number one, it's got to be in the top 5 places to visit in the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think so. And there's so much rich history with respect to the movie and the city itself. I was in Kensington last week, knocking on the door of the house that was Rocky's row house in the movie on East Tusculum Street in Kensington. There's so much there. I've spoken with several of the people involved in the film already, and I'm hoping to track down more. I have a couple more research trips ahead. I've traded emails with Stallone. He has not talked to me yet for the book, but he is answering my emails, so I'll do my best with that, and hopefully he gives in and consents to an interview.
That's great. That's great. Well, Mike, I want to mention again the name of your newest book, which is now available in bookstores, Magic in the Air by Mike Sielski. There it is.
I got to be shameless about this, Paul. You have to be shameless. If you guys see, if anybody sees me, a person standing at the corner of 20th and Olney wearing a sandwich board that says, "We'll sell books for food," you know it's me.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something they don't teach you in a classroom. They don't teach you how
Nope.
to do that. No, it just comes with time and experience, for sure. Mike, always a pleasure to catch up with you. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. Lots of luck with this book. Congratulations. And thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Paul. Thanks.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us here on the Philly Factor. Until next time, my name's Paul Perrello. We'll catch you next time around.